When do I feel rooted? I feel rooted when I'm going to my parents' place and it smells this comfy homemade food. I feel rooted when I see my sister from another mother, those powerful, nosy lady around me. I feel rooted when I feel the richness of my double culture. I feel rooted here, I feel rooted there. I feel rooted when I'm practicing meditation, when I connect to the divine. I feel rooted when I trust myself. I feel rooted when I know everywhere I'm going, I will feel rooted. Being rooted is a feeling, isn't it? Home is in you, home is inside you. Enter the portal.
Girl, nasty, up in a nasty girl, nasty, up in a nasty, nasty, nasty. Is somebody gonna match my freak?
To the question when I feel rooted, I think it's a slightly complex answer because I don't think rootedness is always a similar feeling. It's not something that's always the same. I think it's something that really comes in phases. Like I'm about to turn 30, and actually I started thinking about, hey, family, career, what's gonna happen these coming 10 years. So actually, for me now, rootedness means less experimenting, more stability. Of course, I'm a very curious, playful, and ambitious person. So for me, rootedness also means being in an environment where I'm both stimulated, challenged, but mostly accepted and embraced. Somewhere where people understand me, but also I understand the people around me. Rootedness also has a lot to do with my ability to practice the things that flow out of me and to tell the stories that I think yearn to get out. For me, rootedness is a practice. It's knowing my identity. It's being seen. It's exploring. It's being a bit afraid of the next thing. It's stability. It's being able to have ambitions, and small wins, and being humble, being happy with the steps that I'm taking.
Rooted thinking by the Cuarte Umuca community from Colombia means that thoughts always come from the connection with the soil, water, trees, food, and the singing of birds. They encourage us to bond with the soil and connect with the earth's network of thoughts.
Is there a home, for the adventurers? What is home? Who is home for the curious minded? Is home within me? Is home a thing existing outside of my control? Sometimes hope is the feeling of safety, and sometimes safety is a tool that I use to locate my home. It's a sensibility. Home is where I feel confident, where I feel grounded, to be all of me, all versions of me, without really fearing that I might contradict myself, or a version of me might contradict the other version, and allowing them to exist and play and dance and result into what is my life. But who decides what home is for me? In a globe so big, a universe yet to be fully explored or even understood, have I truly, really found a home? Or am I just visiting places, visiting people, and allowing them to lead me on to the next version of safety, the next level of kindness, the next level of compassion. the things that I decorate my home with, the beauty in my home, those things I find in people, in places, in experiences. So home is a rootedness in my values. Home is a place I choose to go, and as I continue to visit and go, and when I arrive, I sense resonance. I sense resonance. That's my home.
The last few months, I did a deep dive into roots and the meaning of roots and what does it mean to be rooted, and family history and country history and wars and colonialism, and how it affected me, or how it affected my father, or how it affected his family, and how it shaped him or me. And the more research I did and the more I discovered, the more lost I felt and the less rooted. It was as if all this research made me feel unrooted, like I didn't understand the roots, like I didn't speak the language of the roots where I apparently grow on. So it was a journey of getting lost and then refinding myself and my roots by realizing that roots is what I make of it, like how I experience roots. How do I feel rooted? And it's in my head, like I decide if I'm rooted. I decide where I feel like I belong, or if I belong, or if it's important to feel that you belong. And this was very enriching to realize that, yes, there's a lot of history and it's sad and sometimes beautiful, but it's also just history. And I decide how I feel now and what my roots are now and how I feel rooted and how strongly I feel rooted.
Rooted. Rooted in a way that I long to feel included. Rooted in a way that I can embrace who I am. I appreciate the now and don't always want to answer the how. But when curiosity arises, the question comes, where from? Do they want a story or a simple reply? An answer that fits their curious eye. When what they expect doesn't match what they see, the inquiry deepens into heritage and authenticity. People mean well, seeking connection through conversation, but words like exotic push me toward isolation. I ponder the thoughts behind their chosen phrases, how language shapes narratives connected to our faces, that sparks a conversation about coloniality, a complex history that colors our reality. So when they ask, "Where are you from?" I breathe in the silence, counting each drum. Perhaps it's enough to just say that I'm here, rooted in presence, with all that I hold dear. I want to feel rooted in a way that grants me choice, rooted enough to find and freely use my voice. I long for a space where I can simply be, where roots intertwine. It's not about the branches in your tree. In voices like mine, I find solace and grace. Together we can create a welcoming place. Rootedness is not about where you're from. It's about choices made and relationships won. In passions we create, we elevate and innovate, creating a world filled with a sense of wonder that we can all celebrate. I found my mutuals in a multicultural sphere, learning to embrace all that I hold dear. In shared laughter and glances that meet, I discover my roots in the pulse of our street.
I feel rooted when in connection with the present, with the here and now, and that most often happens when I'm either in a very busy place, in a big city where there's a lot of vibrance, a lot of things going on, or in nature, when I'm in the mountains, close to a river. And it's about being surrounded by this big system, feeling anonymous and at the same time perfectly blending in, feeling a sense of belonging, and the realization that I'm part of something bigger. That's when I feel most rooted. I think I also feel rooted in my routines, small things that I see on the sidewalk that I recognize. Little sounds that sound far away but also close by, depending on whether you're focused on it or not. I also feel rooted when I'm surrounded by artifacts, things that I've gathered over the years and that tell me a memory of my own. Something that reminds me of a certain event or certain people, moments in my life that somehow were important to me, because that's why I keep the artifact.
This event is hosted by the Lowlands Decolonial Fashion Network, based in the Netherlands. First, we would like to introduce ourselves, so you have an idea whom invited you here. We start with...
Hello, my name is Willemien Ippel. I'm from Crafts Council Nederland. We're the platform for creative crafts, and we think for the challenges today we need the best brains, but also the best hands, connected in the heart.
Hello everybody, my name is Joan Den Extra, and I'm working for the Linen Project. And I've been working in the textile industry my whole life. But now for the Linen Project, I really work with my heart, which makes me very grateful.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela. I'm part of the research collective for decoloniality and fashion. We're a global network of local fashioning coalitions and communities to decenter and to decolonize fashion knowledges and fashion practices. So we also initiated this global fashioning assembly. So we're one hosting community out of 20, this time from the Netherlands, but there's 19 other countries. Thank you.
Hi, I'm from Michelle Piergelam from Tailors and Wearers. Tailors and Wearers focuses on the Afro-Surinamese cultural clothing, and we try to preserve this traditional and heritage by doing education, like workshops, and also doing presentations, so we all can learn more about it and preserve the heritage.
Hello, my name is Branko Popovic. I'm from the Fashion Clash Foundation, and we are a platform for up-and-coming and the new generation of artists and designers globally. And we, on one hand, try to support and provide a stage, and on the other hand, we want to expand the notion of what fashion is and can be, and do so by placing fashion in a broader societal context, which can be related to societal topics, but it can also be by collaborating with other art forms and therefore stretching the boundaries and limits of what fashion is, can be, and can do to make the world a better place. Thank you.
My name is Ella Broek, and I work together with Michelle at Tailors and Wearers. So, again, a very warm welcome to all of you sitting here at the Jan van Eyck Academy, but also people who are joining us online. Here at the Jan van Eyck Academy today we have been sitting around this beautiful cloth, around this table, in silence for already 15 minutes, embroidering, some of you, and listening to voices speaking about what being rooted means to them. Hopefully it contributed to arrive at this location, feeling present and welcome. In the past 5 months, the Dutch partners, who just introduced themselves, each organize a one-day in-person field trip to host the other communities at their work environment. During those field trips, they together reflected on 4 topics: fashion, cultural heritage, crafts, and natural researchers / local knowledge within the Dutch context through a decolonial lens. These topics are part of a larger conversation about decoloniality and fashion. The goal of these gatherings was to exchange knowledge between local partners, going deeper into each other's perspective and to build new knowledge. We are very thankful to have you all here with us today, and we hope to connect these field trip conversations to you today. For the next 2 hours, we would like to invite you to exchange any thoughts, experiences, feelings, memories, ideas regarding these topics as a follow-up on the conversations of our field trip. In order to give you a starting point or an inspiration, we have attached envelopes with contact behind your chairs. As a little present. The envelopes are organized around 4 colors: green, yellow, orange, and purple. In these envelopes, you will find a question, a quote, or a picture. When the light in the room turns green, the ones who have a green envelope are invited to open their envelope and hold their card up. Look around you. What do you see? What do you see on the cards of the other people from the green group? And what do you see on your own card? You can already take the envelope, but don't open it yet. Wait, but you already see which color you are. So when the envelopes are opened and you see what comes out of the envelope, see, think, or feel which question, picture, or quote speaks to you and why. For the next 20 minutes, the green group, who goes first, is invited to share anything regarding what is on the cards. It can be a thought, a personal story, a protest, a song, a discussion, or something else. It is not a puzzle that needs to be solved or an interview. Just start somewhere and see where it takes you. Please note that you are free to participate when it is your turn, when it is your color, but also free not to participate. And please note to be respectful to each other. When the light changes to yellow, the time is up and the yellow group will start. The yellow group will open the envelope, put the card up so you can see who's in the yellow group. Then after the orange group, and then at last the purple group. Is there someone in this group who speaks Dutch? Because we will do it all in English and does not feel comfortable to speak up in English, we can organize a translator. When you have any thoughts or feelings of things you want to share but you're not part of that group, please hold your thought to yourself and find a moment after to share, so that everybody has room and space to share. So let's turn on the green light. So any green member would like to reflect?
Hello, everybody. I was struck at the beginning of this when there were the sound recordings that somebody mentioned that she felt grounded in a material environment that was familiar to her. And I thought, yes, I have that as well. And when I have clothing that reminds me of my past or my heritage or pleasant events in my life, then I feel comforted, familiar with my surroundings. And so familiarity, I guess, that's an interesting word because it means family, as well as something that's close to your heart. Familiarity is groundedness, and that's found in our clothing. How are we grounded, and how does that translate into our choice of clothing?
I have a picture of the hands, I think tearing out some flax in the field, knowing a bit of background. And I think the questions on this slide also remind me of being in nature and being connected with materials. Something that I also, because I'm a designer myself, and I think it's something that really fascinates also to make and to really feel material. So also what you were saying on like the culture that you wear, but also the feeling of texture. And I think it's really beautiful that all of you, or most of you, are now also touching fabric and making something, even if you don't know what you're making. That's what this image reminded me of.
So I have this picture of like working on the land. I do work with fashion. Like I studied fashion design, but I'm not necessarily a designer. As in, I don't really make clothing out of new materials or anything like that. I do think it's important to know where your material is sourced from, but it's kind of hard to do that nowadays. We just had the interview about the linen and about the craft and how important it actually is to bring craft back in a way to feel connected to your clothing and to create a sense of why you want to keep this piece of clothing or give it maybe a reasoning to want to wear it if you know where it's from. Regarding to the questions, what I think is needed to feel connected to your clothes is a sense of why you're wearing it, what is the reasoning for your expression, and in relation to this project, where your clothes are from.
My picture is the hands that are making, in this case, it's a jeans. We organized this kind of masterclass in 5 weeks you could hand sew your own jeans. And for some people it was really a life-changing experience because people can make again, you know, and we're able to make again. And my heart beats very loud to see you all embroidering now and touching this cloth. It's a very old cloth, more than 100 years old. It's hand loomed. So yeah, it's a very touching experience to see you like this.
So I have this beautiful, beautiful image of the raw material that I believe, has it been spun or it has not been spun? Has not been spun. There you go. So I was very, very, very fortunate to visit the Linen Project in this collaboration for the Global Fashioning Assembly. And I'm just absolutely amazed how little I know. Just now the idea of that I'm actually embroidering on 100-year-old cloth is quite intimidating. But I mean, I guess it really answers the most important question is how do we feel connected to our clothes? I can only admit how very little I am connected to my clothes. I think about a little less than a year ago, I started embroidery, and that took me to all sorts of handcrafts and then even to sewing my own clothes. And it's been an absolutely amazing experience of discovery of how we can actually relate to material or start relating to material, how we can actually start connecting to things that we wear. I can definitely tell if you spend, I don't know, an average of 50 hours on a piece of clothes, that you're not going to discard it very fast. I cannot even imagine what it would be like if you actually really make your own material and then spin your own material and then weave your own material and then make your own clothes by hand. What relationship you then build with a piece of clothing. So for me, that would be the answer. The more time you spend with an object, the more you relate to it, and the harder it gets to part from it.
In response to that, I think also what is interesting or weird to realize is that like big brands like H&M and yeah, that really distant us the most because they don't even promote their own crafts anymore. Like, I think, of course, what is great about is that fashion, if you call it like that, is like more accessible to more different types of people. But doesn't exist that long yet. It's, I think, my generation that grew up with it. But I think generations before me have known times where it's not just that normal. And if I think of my grandpa, for example, that was a time that you would actually go to like a little shop with someone tailoring you a piece of clothing. And so that's only 2 generations before me. And then 2 days ago, I went to a fabric store with my dad, and that's also always a mistake when I'm a bit in a rush because he loves talking. And he started a conversation with the owner of the shop, and of course, so my dad didn't continue the line of cloth making, but so this owner of the store, he did continue the line of cloth selling, or however you call it. But that also this conversation came up about how when you go to a tailor that makes your clothes, it's also such a different experience, because my dad was telling that his dad would only take 4 clients a day. So that's very little if you compare it to how many people there are even present just in one store. And I think that's such a different experience of getting your clothes, and even if you don't make them yourselves, at least you see who actually is making it, and you have a contact and a personal relationship with that person. And I think it's crazy sometimes that I've never experienced something like that, even though that is not such a long time ago.
Thank you. I don't have an image, I have a question, which is, do you feel connected to your clothes? Well, maybe an easy one for me, because it's been always a big part of my life. And for me, I try to use clothing as mapping in a way. So for example, today I'm wearing this green vest, and I thought like maybe not to wear a lot of black, but also more color. And then I got some nice remarks. Some people say, oh, that's really nice. Where did you get it? So it's already, I feel like this is already going to be a memory in my head, and I know it's always attached to it. And when I clean out my closet, the things I get away is the one that I didn't manage to put a story on. So it's not so much the value of a garment. So this was €1 in a pile of stuff, but now it's very valuable. So my mind works like that. So I can map it, and I know exactly what I have and what memory is connected to it. So there are some pieces I just don't manage to create a story for it, and then I notice they kind of get lost in the storage. But yeah, so feeling connected to the clothes is actually, I kind of actively try to put meaning to the clothes. So it's like something that I do because I want to make them meaningful. But it's not only clothes, it's also the jewelry. Everything is from someone. So having them with me, I feel, oh, that's something that I can always have with me because my body can carry them without, there is no physical effort for it. I can just carry them. And I think that's such a beautiful thing about clothes, that you can really easily kind of map it around you. And then it's no longer about, because I don't even know where it's made, but it's like now that I put value to it, and I feel, that's the way how you can map your life. And it's also like, so in a way you're surrounded by memories. If I see my clothes, I see memories. So, yeah.
Maybe somebody from the Green Group would like to share something about being connected to the land, because like you speak about being connected to clothes and to material. We also see a few pictures, working the land, working the fields. And there's a question, what is the experience of your hands with working on the land?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I feel most of all very strongly disconnected to the land, right? It's almost becoming kind of like a luxury to be connected to the land. I think to work the land, to have like a vegetable garden, it's almost like a trend or something, right? Exclusive but in the end, it got us literally so disconnected, I feel, at least. I wouldn't know where to start. I mean, we have a vegetable garden, I think, now for 3 years. We've made quite a few mistakes before it actually started, feeding us. And let alone, make your own clothes from materials that you've grown yourself. Like, it should be, I think, in our DNA, or it should be part of our knowledge. But the reality, I think, is very different. And maybe what Lena was saying, in a sense, it also is a way of making us consumers. If you don't know how to grow your own food, if you don't know how to make your own clothes, you become dependent on the system. You become a consumer. Somebody else needs to make it for you. But then that's also in the system that you then, discard it very easily, whether it is food that you didn't spend all the time growing or materials that you did not spend making, then you don't build relationships. So I think bottom line is investment of time. Since time has become money, became part of a capitalist system where you don't make it yourself, but you go get it, you go consume it, and you discard it to get more.
I think that's such an exciting question about the relationship to the land. I totally agree with Angela that, the industrial system has separated us from the land and alienated us. I went to visit a cheesemaker last week, and it was the Ruige Weide, the rough, thank you, the rough pasture, and they had organic. Can I say organic cows? Anyway, whatever they did organically. And then they grew their own, or they made their own cheeses on their premise. And it was absolutely delicious because they were connected. They were excited. I could see the farmers were really excited. And I said, I am interested in clothing that's made in the same way. So, and I think that's what we're experimenting with in the Netherlands with flax. And I've purchased a piece of linen from the Linen Project. And I haven't cut it yet because that's a very difficult thing to do. It feels like I'm cutting gold and I don't want to ruin it. But it reminds me also of when I work in Indonesia. I have worked with weavers there in North Sumatra for many years. And it occurred to me that the weavers are like bees because traditionally the weavers got the indigo from the fields around them to make blue cloth. The yarn made from cotton they grew on their farms. They spun it themselves. They used kapur. What is kapur? The white stuff you add to indigo, what's that? A chalk, a kind of chalk. And various other substances that they add to the indigo are all locally grown or just in the neighborhood. And so when they put that all together in a piece of cloth, that's like making honey. That's what bees do. They go around, they gather from all the flowers, and they make honey. So I think there's something magical in wearing cloth that represents your flowers and your trees and your bees and the people and the animals in the vicinity. You're wearing your local environment, and that's what home is, isn't it? That's what really being home is. Yeah.
May I say something? Because we're also talking a little bit romantic. Too romantic. Because what you're wearing, it's mostly cotton. Cotton is growing, Hands are harvesting it. It's not our hands. It's weaving, it's spun. So we have this nostalgic, maybe longing for making and growing ourselves. But it is growing, The textiles are growing. What did you want to add? What do you think about this, Because, also there is no shirt coming out of the fabric without a touch of human hands. It's not our hands, who are doing this. But also making textiles, it's a very dirty work. With a lot of dust, with a lot of circumstances. We don't see it with our own eyes, but it's It's there. No, no. We shouldn't be so romantic. Also, working in the fields, Joan can admit this. It's a lot of you feel your back, you know, and sometimes it's very hot. It's 30. We had a time that it was 30 degrees, and we had to work in the land because the harvest had to be done, and we're not used to that anymore.
So it's a good thing that we have people elsewhere doing it for us.
But we should pay them more, you know, and respect them and thank them and attach to our clothes. Yeah.
I agree with you, of course. I mean, the exploitation of labor related to our clothing is slavery. It's pure, unadulterated slavery. But I also think that we are sacrificed when they are sacrificed, in the sense that, like Angela was saying, we lose touch with our local environment. So while there might be back-breaking work and we lose time, there's also a loss that we experience through not having a closer connection to our clothing. And I also don't think that paying another to do the work involved in the clothing that we wear is necessarily the solution. I find that troubling, that a lot of activists in the fashion area argue only for better pay for workers, because someplace in there is embedded this notion that they, the other, will continue to produce for the person who has more money. And I have been a strong advocate always for not, or at least ensuring that everybody, every people on this planet have the room, have the space to perpetuate their own clothing tradition and not to be tied to the clothing tradition of a richer person or culture.
Amen.
Thank you very much, guests who belong to the Green Group. I can imagine we have to get used to a little bit being part of a group and then speak your mind and not being part of this group and hold your thoughts to yourself. But I think we're getting into it. The yellow group, I would like to invite you to open your envelopes, see what's in there, and show them also.
Hi, neighbor. Tevin Blancheville. I'm a member of the Decolonal group. So my question is, which role does fashion play in enhancing or threatening cultural diversity? So first of all, I want to say that I don't think I'm the right person to answer the whole picture, because you keep encountering new stories or new perspectives in everyone that has an opinion about it. But we just had a quite interesting conversation with Sandra Neeson about cultural diversity and actually how westernized fashion is, or the term fashion in and of itself. And that brought me back actually to some trauma and growth that I've had through my years, coming from Curaçao, learning the term fashion and design in an academy in the Netherlands, which I'm happy for that I learned it in that way. But I remember when I moved here, actually feeling that everything we made in Curaçao wasn't fashion. For me, then fashion, and the teachers that were teaching me, fashion meant everything that had to do with haute couture. It had to do with the history of Europe, or it had to have a link in between. And for us in Curaçao, fashion was mostly the clothes you wear, you know, how you combine it, the colors that you dare combine with each other. Because if you even look at a helicopter view from the city of Willemstad, you will see every single building has a color. So for us, it's very color clashing. I think that's something that's also very present in a lot of countries with African diaspora. So for me, fashion now changed from is changing from what I got brought up with in the academy, and actually finding out in a broader context outside of in a European context of the stories we tell with ourselves. And also, for example, when is something appropriation, or when is something a study, or can you recognize yourself in another culture and try that out because it really speaks to you? So for me, those questions for me is very interesting. And yeah, go outside of the norms I feel that we've created for ourselves in the environment that we are in. Yeah, that's it.
Hello to everyone. I'm Rebecca Straatmans. I'm also working at the Jan van Eyck Academy, not in the fashion sector. So everything that I'm saying comes from a very personal view. And I have this photo. It shows exhibition. And it shows, to me, at the first sight I see African garment. This is something that I would immediately think it is. But then I read an article about somebody who brought this, who brings those garments to Europe and also worldwide. And this man is from Indonesia. So most of the garments that we can buy here that looks like this are distributed from somebody from Indonesia, and I found this quite interesting. And I'm also questioning myself, why do I find this so interesting? And then this is also connected to something that I experienced yesterday when I was wearing a knitted sweater with a very big red flower knitted on it. It's handmade. And I was approached by a young woman, and she told me that when she entered the room and she saw my sweater, she immediately felt home because she was from Ukraine. And she told me that this very much reminded her of her heritage and where she comes from. And so again, I had the question of, okay, now I'm wearing this, which somebody reminds immediately of home, and not being aware of the fact that this is a pattern, that this is familiar to her and feels familiar for her. So yeah, but she told me that she was happy to see it. Yeah, so this is this is my first association with this picture. So wearing something that is absolutely not something that's connected to your own heritage, and being aware of the fact and what does it do.
So I have this picture of the Vogue of Philippines, and what I see is, actually I'm not very familiar with like the Vogue around the whole world, but I kind of I understand that like there's not so much like people from this generation that are like on the cover of a Vogue. So I think it's a kind of important statement to show like different generations, and I think it's also kind of very personal what I see, like it's kind of very intimate of like seeing her tattoos and like show her like personal story, what is she actually wearing on her skin. I don't know the person actually, but yeah, I think it kind of touched me, like this kind of intimacy of a new generation, another generation, and especially talking about beauty standards. And I'm also not very familiar with Vogue of Philippines, so I'm actually also curious, actually, like about what is the narrative of Vogue Philippines and how is it related to Vogues like in Europe. So yeah, I'm also having a lot of questions actually.
Hello, I do not have a picture on my card. I have a question. It is the one on the bottom. What can be examples of a decolonial act? Then it's followed up by asking, is making your own clothes one of them? Going into the first one first, I think what can be an example of decolonial act is just reflecting on your heritage, talking about your roots, where you feel comfortable. And I think it's also important to recognize the fact that colonialism has been a part of history for like centuries and hundreds of years. So looking at the generations now, they might have a different idea of what their history may look like. And there may be more of like a mixed, merged culture where, while their historical and like, I guess I want to say traditions, may not be as pertinent in their lives, but it doesn't mean that they're still not a part of that culture. And then talking about the second question, is make your own clothes one of them? Yeah, I think definitely for some cultures it can be, but I think for other ones not so much. Like I look at the pictures there, and I see in the top left corner what appears to be a group of people wearing very traditional garb, of potentially a religious group or something like that. And it makes me think like a culture like that, where you're potentially not very willing to engage with other cultures or things like that. You'll obviously make your own clothes, but then there are some other cultures where you do not, right? Like we talked about earlier, there's the whole complex of going to a store and buying your clothes and having to rely on that, where it's not necessarily a bad thing, because every culture has something they contribute to the world, which might not necessarily be making your own clothes.
I do think to the question again of which role fashion plays in enhancing or threatening cultural diversity, I think to put cultural appropriation away where you know, it's very clear that something is being stolen or something is being used to mock others. I think it's very interesting actually to treat fashion or fashion pieces as just ingredients in this meal that you're making, as a way of expressing and researching your own identity. Because I do feel that not all of us are born or raised where we belong in the end, or where the person we develop into. And I think clothes or fashion has always been a way to express yourself, right? And by placing yourself into this culture by way of maybe food or the way you wear something, maybe like a cowboy hat, or maybe, I don't know, the skirts you would have in Holland, that's also a way to start a journey into diving deeper into a culture. And I think that's something that we shouldn't cast away just because we're afraid of cultural appropriation. I think we should define or have a common sense in when someone is just doing something out of curiosity and appreciation, as opposed to, hey, you're stealing something from me. Because when we look at cuisines, we're mixing things all the time, for the good and for the better, and things that don't work out, we leave out, or you just taste in your house. And the rest goes into restaurants where majority of people can enjoy it. So I think when it comes to the way we look, I know it's a much more sensitive topic because of the history with slavery and colonialism, but I do think that it's a step we have to take as a whole.
I have this picture, depicts, I think, traditional clothing in the north, I don't know, maybe the south, I don't know, of the Netherlands.
No, Zeeland.
It's Zeeland, yes, okay. So it's more the south of the Netherlands. And we were talking about rootedness before, so it's also like, it also makes you feel rooted when you dress the same way, so you're kind of together in a group, and it also makes you feel safe and supported, and that there are like-minded people, they will step in for you. So in a way, it's a way to feel safe and feel rooted, but it's also, at the other hand, I think, a way to, if there's multiple groups of this, that it's more difficult to mix. So it also keeps maybe people away from each other in a way. I think if they, like talking about the mix you were just talking about, then if you can break a little bit of those rules, then you can get the best of all and mix it in this new mix, but without totally losing what you find valuable in the group where you are at. and it's a little bit away from really like, yeah, the main questions we were just talking about. But I think it's the role of, well, I wouldn't say fashion maybe, but it's the role of expressing yourself through clothing, to make these bonds or to actually not make them, and make sure that people stay apart from each other.
Somebody from the online community posted something that says, in Zagreb, we have South America's indigenous artifacts in the ethnography museum. I'm personally against this practice of taking other cultures' items, but I'm asking myself, would I and many other people ever see these items if they would not exhibit there? And then PS, I just visited the museum's website. It says those are mostly photos and postcards, but I remember there are some cultural exhibitions also there.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive topic because you know, if you look at the history of how it got there in the first place, you would say absolutely not. But the thing is, I think that the pain and the history that's happened between then and now and where we are right now is not something that's going to disappear. And I think that by forgetting, I think the majority of artifacts should be where they're from. But I also think there's every artifact that's not where they're originally from is also an ambassador for that culture and the ways of the people. And if you take that away, you can also take away the compassion or the story there, you know, how people relate with you. When people see an African mask in a mostly white place, they immediately understand the story that could have happened there, you know, the colonization. And I think that's very important for these conversations that we're having right now. If everything was where they're supposed to be, you wouldn't have that dialogue anymore, because what's the point, you know, or it's less visible. Because then it will be all a clean slate. So I think there is definitely a strength in things being out of place because it makes you pay attention.
I think it's a good practice as well to be a listener and to be a participant. And there can also be some silence and just thoughts and embroidery. Silence is painful, but it's necessary sometimes. Maybe the second question. What are the consequences of terms like tradition, folklore, and heritage? Somebody has an idea? What does it mean that we use those terms?
I'm just thinking about a specific like repetition, a certain like lens or frame that can change. But somehow I think it's also like kind of talking about tradition. It's also keeping like a base of something like a specific identity. Talking about fashion or other traditions and cultures. I think, I don't know, I'm just thinking about these words. Yeah.
Maybe thinking things through till the very beginning, to start where certain things come from, how it all started, maybe with the very seed that was planted into the soil, and then how it was grown, and all the traditions that come together, all the rituals that come together with every single step that the garment has taken till the moment that somebody's wearing it. So really, maybe the whole history of the clothes.
Thank you, yellow group. Orange group, you can open your envelopes. Are we all doing okay still? Being a bit okay in this sometimes uncomfortable way of communicating with each other? Okay. So can you put your cards up so we can see what is on the cards? Okay. Okay. Who would like to go first?
On my card, there's a question. What are your personal connections or experiences with the Afro-Sudanese fashion heritage? I did the introduction that I'm part of the foundation Tailors and Wearers, so, but I will explain a bit more how I got, how I started being interested in this topic, because my background is Surinamese, and it's my parents came from Suriname at a young age to the Netherlands. They were at the age of 1 and 6. So here in the Netherlands, they went to school, went to work, and yeah, dived into the Dutch culture, as you can say. And only since a couple of years, I'm researching within my work, and I work as a photographer, and I make different art projects as work. So since a couple of years, I'm thinking, where do I come from? I work with a lot of stories, cultural stories, which I found very interesting, which also say a lot about the culture, their beliefs, but their interests. For example, in the Surinamese culture, there's also a lot of spirituality, and yeah, it says a lot about it. And only since a couple of years, I'm busy with it, and my connection to the Surinamese cultural clothing is for one project that I made. I did a project about the Surinamese Anissa, and that's a headscarf which women can wear on their head, and it has a traditional binding, and every end result has a different meaning. So it has a sort of a hidden message. And I really wanted to know how I can fold this headscarf, because I couldn't find it on the internet. And therefore I did met my other colleague who is not here today, but she's also part of the foundation. We are with the three of us, and there I met Jane, and she is really, she's a Surinamese woman who did learn those techniques, and she had a wish how to preserve her knowledge, because as from the urge that I also already said, like, I couldn't find it on the internet, and nowadays everything is on the internet. And what if the knowledge isn't written down, and it's disappears if it's not written down? So there we started Tailors and Wearers Foundation as a way to preserve this technique, and therefore I learn every day more about traditional clothing. So this is my connection with it.
I have a picture of like woman holding her arms and looking kind of authoritarian, maybe kind of proud. So maybe, and she's wearing traditional clothes from, I don't know where it is from, but I think what this picture tells is that she's really proud of her own culture and her own roots. And also it's interesting that in this picture there is only one person, and like besides her there are no other people. Yeah. And from what I heard from the previous topic, I was like thinking like this kind of traditional clothes are kind of similar. I mean, not. It creates a sense of community, but it's on the other hand, like there is only one person in this picture, which is really interesting for me.
Okay, so my card had a question. It was, what is the future role of cultural heritage or collections? And the first thing that my mind went to is kind of back to that sustainability piece and looking at maybe more of those traditional ways that we used to make clothes and how we used to use the land can play a bigger role in how we make clothes and how we interact clothes with going forward. So I think in the future it'll be important to maintain these different cultural heritage aspects so that we can continue to draw on them and use them, but also reimagine them in a way that makes sense for us today as the world keeps changing.
So I have this picture on the left top corner, and the description says, docent Helen Vreugd and Audrey Felter during the Master Anguissa folding. It's in Dutch, but in 2024. So I assume this is like a traditional way of folding fabric. I don't really know what to say about it because I don't know anything about it. But I feel like it's a very sweet picture. I think it's very beautiful to continue sharing these methods of making fashion or like clothing. And I think on a personal note, I would really love to have that in my life because I was born in China, but I'm adopted, so I don't have much knowledge on my Chinese culture, which is sometimes quite confusing because people don't assume I'm more Dutch. Yeah, well, I don't identify more Dutch or more Chinese because I think that's a bit useless. But I think it's funny because I've been in this klederdracht on the right bottom when I was in this Openluchtmuseum, you know, when you can try it on yourself, which is really funny because I don't know, it's not something that I was biologically connected to. Yeah, I don't know, I think it's very sweet to, or something very beautiful to have this clothing as something that your family or your generations before you have worn and continue wearing that. But for me, it's always a bit double, yeah, exactly. So I think because I never knew which culture I wanted to research, I never did any of them, or like I never delved into any of them. But now I'm really interested in both of them, and also how it's connecting, because of course, there's many connections between the Netherlands and China and other, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, if anyone has any more knowledge on the picture, I would love to know more about it as well.
Yeah, hi, my name is Andrea. I have the picture on the left corner in the bottom, and it says Anastasia Fares, Schoonhoven, in the Netherlands, 1958, an unknown photographer. So I assume that the woman is called Anastasia. Anastasia, yeah. And you see a woman wearing traditional clothing. I suppose it's Suriname's, with a child next to her. And I don't know how to read this combination. The woman is wearing also a basket with bananas in it and a lot of Dutch flags. It's, yeah, it raises a lot of questions. So if anybody can identify the clothing, but I also see a phrase over there. Can I associate that with this image?
Yes,
yeah, the moment I put on my koto, Suriname's costume, I automatically start singing certain songs. They come into my head unconsciously. At that moment, I feel the presence of those who have passed away. I feel it in my body. I feel the sadness. I don't know, I really get goosebumps from it. The clothing can also give you these emotions, but also, well, it dresses you. It also gives you the presence of others, reminding of traditions of other people that you belong to. I think that's very beautiful with traditional clothing, with clothing that you maybe also have for a long time yourself. And I still wonder with this kid next to her. Is it her kid or is it a combination? I don't know if anybody can help me with that. It also has a schminked face, maybe.
Well, what kind of question? Because you mentioned it raises questions.
Yeah.
What kind of questions do you have?
Yeah, is that also part of traditional costume next to it? Is that a more child variation of it? And is it a schmink, white schmink? Why? Makeup? Yeah. That's a bit like, there's also arbitrary there.
Hi, I'm Agatha, and the picture that I have here is two women dancing. Their names are Marlene Poljam, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and Patricia Tell during Keti Koti 2024. So this is in Rotterdam, and I am familiar with this. I would love to go and see it for myself. I just moved there. And yeah, they're dancing to their traditional music and in their traditional clothing. And of course, it's the celebration of the breaking of the chains from slavery. And yeah, I think that I was also trying to connect it a little bit with what Tevin was saying, like, okay, so it's good that we have those artifacts or patterns that are here, but I wonder as well in what conditions, you know. I think, of course, if they weren't here, then, as you say, yeah, well, one way to view it is we wouldn't know about them, but I don't think that's completely true. Because as you can see here, people are basically reclaiming their culture and, yeah, putting it back in its place, which I think is something that's also happening here in the Netherlands. It's I'm Spanish, by the way, so there's a lot of phenomena here that to me are impressive because we're not taking any action in Spain. For instance, I'm talking specifically about the fact that some of those artifacts are, like the ministry is doing work. I mean, I know that right now it's questionable, right? But in essence, they're trying to get those artifacts back to the lands where they come from, in a sense. So these pieces would be gone, and in a sense, then you wouldn't know. But I think there's a history about those pieces, and there's so many ways of documenting those. There's so many ways of documenting these artifacts that I don't think it is worth to keep them where they don't belong, in a sense. I think they're better off where they came from, in a sense, and then let the people show you what it's about. Because there's a lot of misinterpretation anyways, so in the West, about other cultures, right?
What is your optimistic or pessimistic point of view when it comes to preserve cultural heritage items or collections? My optimistic view. Well, I think it's good that we are now working on preserving cultural heritage and because, for example, in the Surinamese history, a lot is not documented well. And still about some parts of the history, there are some question marks if it happens or it, how do you say it, something came up during or after slavery, or yeah, when it started, and but nothing or not much is documented right. And I think it's good now with all the people who are busy with the topic to see how we can get in as much information as possible about the topic and make it accessible for even more people. So, and with Tailors and Wares, we try to be a part of it. And yeah, I think this is my optimistic point, that we only go to a better place where we have even more knowledge and we can enjoy each other's culture. We have to do some effort to get to know each other's culture. But I think only good things come with that.
Like what I just came up with in my mind is a bit different from the preservations of traditional clothes, but once I've was reading a magazine, and then the magazine was introducing kind of luxury brands that use like African traditional prints or designs. And I think it's really nice that those like non-Western designs were kind of normalized and then projected as aesthetic to a majority of people. And maybe there is a negative aspect, because like those traditional aesthetic were seen as exotic and something different. Maybe it could be seen as like inferior and different from like a Western words, but at the same time could be normalized and people can be familiar with that culture.
Thanks for sharing. Then we can change the light into purple. Thank you, Orange Group. And the people with the purple envelopes can open.
I have a question in my envelope. It goes like, decoloniality seems to be on trends. How can we address this intrinsically, oh, these words, sorry. Maybe it's also the question, but I don't know, really. I really don't know. Because we have been talking about this also among the groups and the projects all together, and it's I don't know, it's difficult, but for me it's difficult. I think it's important to have a dialogue, to talk about it, to know more about it, to know more different perspectives on it, so you can think about it and maybe make an opinion about it or change your behavior. I don't know, but for me, I'm sorry to say, but I don't know.
I have a question as well. It says, what are the possible methods to facilitate a dialogue around decolonial matters? And I think that what we're doing right here, right now, is already a good example. It's like having the space to discuss what coloniality is in the first place and what impact it had on people. It's already a good start. So that's what I wanted to say.
Hi. I also got a question. I think Papa Team, we just got questions. Anyway, what does decoloniality in relation to fashion mean in the context of the Netherlands? And I thought this was a very interesting question that I found, because this was really the question to our residency. And maybe I would like us to just maybe when we watch the film, we'll get more into that, and I don't want to preempt. So I will choose to answer the other questions that I find that are very, maybe more relevant to me. Wow, so much to unpack here. I will start by I wouldn't. What does it mean to take responsibility? Oh, and then I will talk about restitution, and like I said, I'm very selective. And maybe what role can designers and artists like myself take within their own practice to address the topic of decoloniality? All right. So I think we all agree that, this is a really bad thing that happened. And why is it even happening? Because there is still neocolonialism. I think the first thing that I would like to point out is that when we think about decoloniality, we're really talking about the present thing that it's in the elephant in the room, the uninvited guest that is here with all of us. Most of us, we are wearing fast fashion, not by choice, but it's there. We could, I love that you're wearing the linen, thank you for that. And there's a lot of initiative that we are asking people to decolonize, but we are first asking ourselves to decolonize. And this conversation started for me very many years ago when I was back in Kenya. I think just as a teenager, I started to really want to dress in African attire, quote unquote African attire. And I would also start buying fabrics. I was in love with fabrics. I'd just look for fabrics and just be fascinated by the patterns and the designs. And I'm like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I want it for myself. And I think I really connect with Leila when you said that for you, home is some of the material things that hold memory for you. And there was one fabric that I was so connected to because it was a gift from my mother, and then felt like it's just a tradition I need to keep doing for myself. And then you can imagine the heartbreak when later on I came to realize that what we call African fabrics is now really from Africa. Some of it just comes from here, and then it's sold in, and when I say here, I mean actually Netherlands. And then it's sold, the Dutch wax is sold in African shops as African product. And then the heartbreak for me is realizing that although there were hands behind this and there were people behind this, that the truth about the product is not very transparent. And it may be made by, maybe it's Africans living in the Netherlands who have made this. So then it's a very different context for us. Anyway, back to the question, what does it mean to take responsibility? I will just say that transparency is very important because it means that we are being honest with what we are dealing with when we are making the purchase, when we are choosing not to support Temu, and we're choosing our local tailors. Being very conscious about our activities here now, the present. I think that the answer is in the present. That everything that we do now has repercussions, and there's a ripple effect. Now the next question. How do we address matters of restitution? And I love the word restitution because it's more like restoring. It's in the same family of restoration. Another word that is normally used in this conversation is What do you mean when you need to give back reparations? So I also found it interesting that wasn't the word, because I was expecting that one, and maybe that is my expectation when it comes to the context of colonization, decolonization. We acknowledge that there was an invasion on people from the global south, if you want to call it that, but there was an invasion, period. And with an invasion, you have, even now, if I invade you, I have already wronged you. It is so intrusive. And so when you think about restitution, I have seen countries that have apologized, and they have said, we are sorry. I love what Agatha was saying, that the Netherlands is actually planning to give back some of these artifacts that are in the museum. And I hope many other countries can, do it as well. The question is always, why do you feel like you would be a better custodian of my things than I would? And I know this thing much better than maybe you do. And maybe sometimes if you're thinking spiritually, maybe this thing is dead and inactive and docile, when it's docile in the place that it shouldn't be. And maybe it comes alive when it comes back home, where this conversation started earlier on. So restitution might also be acknowledging that as a people and as a population, the world over, forget the borders, forget the races, just the citizens of this world, the humans, the collective spirit that we have, that we are evolving. Yes, we have sunk low. There was an invasion. I feel like those are some of the lowest moments of our collective consciousness. And over time, we have been healing, and healing really is such a long process. Now it's centuries old for some of us, and some people will never really see the healing of the land or of the people. But individually, as small communities like this, then we can start to heal each other by even opening these conversations and actually practicing what it is that we preach, and then holding that candle for each other and just being a little bit of warmth for each other. And then now my last question. What role can designers like Koyo or artists like Koyo take with their own practice to address the topic of decoloniality? So I'll start by just saying, like, maybe what we do as Liquid Lamb, which is the brand that I run, and I really I'm an ambassador of, because it's really a teamwork. And one of the things that I have learned is to really take it up, because it is a role that you need to take up. You can participate in fast fashion if you want to. It's really a choice. So you make the conscious choice, and then you choose to walk that journey. I think there's a lot of education that needs to go into this. So beyond creating beautiful garments and putting them on the runway or putting them in a store, there's a lot of education work that needs to be done. So a lot of outreach. And I think the way we design our futures, the way we design the companies that we want to run, the way we design the ecosystem that we call fashion, our textile industry, is really dependent on the gaps that we see and how we want to fill those gaps. So when you have an intern, for example, how are you journeying them through their decoloniality? Because it is really a person-to-person job, or rather work, that you need to really induct this person and make them understand, this is really where we're coming from. Some of us have also been very unawares for so long, until you really stick around, and then you realize, oh my God, the ship is sinking. There are holes in this ship. And so I will end it there.
Thank you. I have a picture of a collection by Nienke Kremers. And I think it says I couldn't make an ethical collection. Actually, the thought that comes to mind to me is that actually it's all about people. I think I relate what you're saying too, that culture and fashion and coloniality or decoloniality, it is actually all about people, how you treat your intern, how you are connected with the people around you, how you are connected with the people far away or close. And also having objects in a museum or having objects from a community that is far away here for us to see and to learn from. That we can only learn to a certain extent because the people are not present who live with the objects. And I think that if we really want to learn cultures, that we have to get to know people. And materials can be a very very welcome, how do you say, like a mediator or like a bridge almost. I think also how we sit here surrounded or around this craft, around this table, also having this embroidery on our lap. It makes it a little bit less comfortable to be in silence if you have something to do. But to me it warms my heart actually that you are all here and that we sit with each other and that everybody shares. And we are very different cultures here sitting in this room, and we're not gonna get to know each other, all of us, but being present with people, I think that's for me a very necessary thing, I think. Also being educated as an anthropologist in science, where I was always getting questions like this, having to think about these things and had to explain and theorize, which I think is very interesting and it's very helpful in many ways, but sometimes it's actually not helpful. Sometimes it's just, to me, nicer just to sit with each other. And I would like to open up the floor for a little while, because I know that some of you had thoughts that was not related to your group conversations. And I want to thank you for holding it with you. But now you can, we open up the conversation and we can function as a colorful group. So all colors. Anybody would like to share?
It was the yellow picture. Yeah, that I think there was someone who said something about the African fabrics underneath. That it was somebody from Indonesia, but it's rooted in colonization. The whole batik is rooted in colonization. It wasn't brought over, it was stolen. And it's brought here, and then there's the company, that is in the Netherlands, that sells it to African countries and makes it an African product. But it is always going to be rooted in colonization, this type of fabric, this batik fabric, as well as I wanted to educate the person about this one. It's about the skin tattoos. It's also made in a traditional way of tattooing in the Philippines, and it's still used in Thailand as well, and in Bali as well. So that's also what I just wanted to educate on.
Thank you.
Agatha's response of what I said about having things out of context, I do agree. Because actually I was at I think Maurits Museum in The Hague, and there was this conversation with Vera. Actually, it was this housemate of hers, and we had this conversation about even documentation of art that is not indigenous to the Netherlands. And then they spoke about the difficulties that comes with even the morality or the ethics behind it, because some art from some cultures are not allowed to be documented. Some arts, they're only meant to be felt in a room. Where I do think we go very wrong is having this one person or this group of people in the museum that are not really related to the culture taking charge of how to present it. I also think there's, like I said, a strength in having things out of context. So I think, at least in the Netherlands, in certain parts of the Netherlands, we're very much in a transition period where we're asking ourselves, hey, what's been done? What do we think about it? Well, a lot of us already think, well, it's not right. And we're asking ourselves, how do we deal with it in the future? So I think there's even maybe a strength into having some of this art in the same building shown in the Western way, out of context, and then having, in the room next to it, for example, really presented and set up and curated by people from the culture that know the value of this. So you can really feel what it's like to have that thing out of context. You can really feel this aura, because there's a difference, especially in fashion. You see it very much. Film or pictures do not do justice to the energy of an object. It can be very small, but if in the right way, done with the right rituals, maybe it's a scent, maybe the dance you have to do, maybe you have to stay quiet, that all really changes it. So I think we have to make room for, in collaboration with the original cultures, because it's very wrong to think that we indeed know how to present it. We're never gonna know. So we have to learn and take this moment to actually also realize that, hey, here in the West we have podiums that is a result of colonization, but they have a certain value nonetheless, because there's a lot of eyes here, there's a lot of money, a lot of resources, so we can also really give this podium back to, hey, these objects, these cultures, hey, we have this, would you mind loaning it to us so that we can learn from the mistakes that we've made and maybe present it in the right way? I think that's a much more, for me, than interesting way of dealing with these objects, other than to take all of them back home, and then the next generation won't even know that these things were here. Because when you look at it in the books, with all the words, I don't know, me, I just get bored if I'm not already invested into something, but if I bump into it, it pulls me in. And I think, yeah, thinking about this transition period for us as a culture, we should also think about how we deal with these things.
I'm just going to pick up from there and say that, no, on topic. I was reading this morning that the British Museum holds around 50 billion worth of artifacts that were, of course, extracted from other places, indigenous places, and then that is already enough to serve the British GDP and even have some. So then, just by that rationale already, that there's a lot of issue with what they call the Commonwealth. I will also say that, and this is to maybe someone who's online, I hope they're still there and they're listening, and there was a comment that was made that they were really not happy with the fact that we have museums holding artifacts, but then they said that, but how would someone like me get to see these objects if they are not here? And that's our biggest problem, where we think that there would be no access if it's not next door. And that's not true. If you want to go and see a lion, you can take a flight and you book a trip and you have a good summer, So you can just add it to the itinerary. And I think it's just, this is like the mundane way of thinking about it. But now we have VR, virtual reality technology. I mean, we have so much immersive options where you really do not have to steal people's culture so that you can, in whatever name, you cannot validate it. We have so many options at this point.
I also wanted to react on that. It's also sometimes the way they write about what is being shown. I went to the New Institute when I went there when I was still in art school, like studying. I went there and we all had to pick out a room. And there was one room that was, because I'm Indonesian, it was an Indonesian type room. And it was saying about how they were reminiscing about this time when they had all this and how beautiful it all was and they brought it all here, but they were all talking about it so happy. All I could think about is everything my grandma told me about how hard it was when the Dutch was in Indonesia. That's all I could think about, so that's the feeling that I got from it naturally. But it's what is written that feels wrong to me. It's like, it's not a kumbaya moment. No, it's not something to celebrate per se that the Dutch was there. I don't know, it's still noticeable in the country now how much the Dutch actually, the consequences of colonization, like it's still very visible and very noticeable there. So to read it here and then reminiscing about that time, it's also kind of hurtful and very painful to read.
I'd like to say two things. One is just in response to the current discussion about, whether we'd have access if we didn't have things in museums. I think we should turn the coin over and say, how many people elsewhere in the world have access? That access that we have is a very privileged position that's a result of coloniality. And I think it's important to remember that that is the fat of coloniality. And the other thing I wanted to mention is related to the question of whether coloniality is found in fashion in the Netherlands and whether it can ever end. Well, I think it's really, really important to remember and remind ourselves that every single one of us here is wearing coloniality because our clothing is all from industrial fashion, and that's all made on the basis of exploitation and creating the distinction between North and South. If we want to have decolonial clothing, I think the only thing in the room right now is what's on our laps. What Joan is wearing, thank you. Yeah, I have to acknowledge that indeed many people here are designers and make their own clothing, and I applaud that. And but many of you who know me don't even know that I don't even like the word designer, because I have become familiar with a culture where design is created by the community. There are no professional designers. That in itself is a colonial legacy, that notion of a designer. I think it's really, really important to notice or to remind ourselves that coloniality is not just found in interpersonal relationships. It's found embedded in social structures and social organization, and our entire society is rooted in coloniality. And even if we try to bring more BIPOC into the boardroom, that doesn't eliminate coloniality. That is just another form of incorporation and expansion. I think we're really, really naive if we think that the age of coloniality is ending. And we only, excuse me for this, but we only have to look at what's happening in Lebanon and Gaza to be reminded of this. So that's my very negative ending here. Um, I, um, I applaud this meeting. I think it's terribly important. I think we mustn't be naive in thinking we're at the tail end of coloniality. We have a hell of a lot of work to do.
I would like to add a little bit to that, because you end quite negatively, which I understand, looking at the world. I also think, as a designer, that change happens maybe in small steps, in baby steps, in little things. And as a designer, I have a studio where I make all my clothes, where everything that's there I make. The setup is that you see that I make it. So when I have a customer, we talk about how the design is made. It's not a situation where I'm a tailor and somebody asks me to make something. I actually make the design and then talk to the customer. So I call it slow fashion. I don't work with seasons. I don't work with collections that are dismissed after one season. Some of my items are in the collection for over 10 years. I have customers that come back and tell me 10 years later they still love to wear it, that they still feel very connected to the garment because they know where it's made, they know the story. On the role in, as a designer in the decolonizing process or the colonization, I'm from a background where I'm actually the product of colonization. I wouldn't be here if the Netherlands never colonized. My grandfather had a coffee plantation in Sumatra. He was together with an Indonesian woman, my grandmother. It's quite a personal story for me, this whole being together, and it's been quite a trip. And I read a lot of about the history, which I didn't know. I learned a lot about history, and I think it's very important because I think a lot of people have no idea, like they don't know. So it's very difficult to talk to people and don't understand why they're so ignorant because they don't know. They didn't learn in school, even though it's part of the Dutch history. It's like something that's not really talked about a lot, and lately it's more talked about. And I think it's super important to talk about it and to learn about the history. And for me as a designer, I also apply it directly to what I do. So I was reading that the coffee plantation of my grandparents was named after a mushroom that grows on Sumatra. And I found it so fascinating that a coffee plantation was named after a mushroom. And I looked up the mushroom and I was very much blown away about the beauty of the mushroom. So I incorporated the mushroom in my design. So I'm actually wearing it right now, also on the back of my jacket. So I think, what do I think? I think so many things, and it's very difficult to have like one thing to say about it. So I'm just gonna leave it at this.
I just want to say one last thing. So we were talking about, Koya mentioned, for example, the power and the beauty of VR, and to go back to when I was at the Mother's House, there was a speaker there from Papua New Guinea, and that's one of the places where the biggest mines for minerals that are used in VR sets and all the newest TVs, holograms, everything that actually could replace us having these artifacts, which are scars of colonialism, by replacing them with a new way that we could still be in touch where history actually requires new forms of colonialism. So that whole transition in and of itself is such a big problem. So if you take away the mask and you bring VRs, you're deciding to, for example, try to heal the past and create new trauma. So for me, I don't have an answer to this. It's very difficult. I try not to buy. But at a certain point, you do hit a wall, and for me, the question is where, when do we stop, or how do you decide how far you go? I don't have an answer to this, but I think it's something important to think and not to be naive, because I have it a lot of times that I think, oh, this is an answer, but that's because we're so far away from the crafting of the situation or the solution that we think we found.
I would like to answer maybe one of the questions that was asked about the kotomisi and together with the kid next to it. These pictures are from my stepmom. She, in the left bottom is her grandma from Suriname, and in the right bottom is her grandma from Zealand. So it's both her grandmas. And yeah, also one of the reasons that I started doing this work with Michelle and Jane. And my stepmom, Stasia, she always told me that her grandmother, Anastasia, was living in Suriname, came to the Netherlands when she was already, I don't know exactly, but maybe 50 or something, and that she could walk in the défilé for the Queen, and that was something that she was so proud of. Like, it was something that was very very important for her, and also to pose like this, which to me is maybe a little bit questionable, that why are you posing next to a bit of a clownesque child? Yeah, but for her this was, and also with the Dutch flags on her head, in her basket full of fruits, it was something that she was really proud of. And also that maybe with our knowledge now about colonialism and decolonialism, we have many thoughts about it, but yeah, her proudness I remember as well. So we have just a few minutes left before we let in the online community.
Yeah, now that you said that we only have a few minutes left, maybe this is not a good question to ask. But yeah, what started, that's okay, thank you. What started kind of like these groups coming together, reflecting actually around what does decoloniality mean in a Dutch context. I kind of like maybe want to close the circle, as in, yeah, that's what brought us together. I mean, first the 5 communities, then we became the Lowland Decolonial Fashion Network, and then now we're all inviting you in. Yeah, maybe to get back to that question, should this be on our minds as in the Dutch context? I mean, I'm part of a research collective on decoloniality. I've been asked many, many, many times, why did you start a collective on decoloniality? Is this something that should be discussed either in Europe, either in the Netherlands, either as a white person, because that's how I'm identified? Again, maybe not, we can't answer it in a few minutes, but if anybody has any thoughts or ideas, just to kind of like close the circle of where we started 2 years ago.
I think the answer is obvious, Angela. Here we are. And we've been talking all afternoon. And we realize how profound, how the incredible depth of this topic. And, well, let me just say, I'm sure I speak for everybody, I'm really glad you set up the RCDF, the Research Collective for Decoloniality and Fashion. And this is only one day of a whole month of events. And I know the people here have been working on this for a long time. It's brought a lot to the surface. I'm really struck by the depth of backgrounds present in this room and the incredible variety of thought It's a conversation that's been waiting to happen for decades, if not centuries. And thank you.
So, yes, this was the first part of our afternoon of this event. We had 2 hours of sharing. I want to thank you all for being part of it, listening, sharing, and just being present. I've learned a lot today.
I decided to join because I'm actually from South Africa, and I come from a community that was labelled Cape Malay under apartheid because of our mixed ancestry. And so our material culture and our material heritage has very complicated ties to colonial trade routes. And of course, the biggest event was that we were colonized by the Dutch. And as a consequence, via all of these trade routes, we had a very mixed population of slaves from Asia as well as across the African continent. And my research is in the area of this kind of mixed heritage and colonial trade routes. And so a large part of that is connected to the Netherlands. So, hi everybody.
Hi, welcome. Do you have any thoughts you want to share on what you heard this afternoon, or any questions, or?
Well, thank you so much for organizing this. I was a little bit late because I was teaching, so I also teach at a university here in London. So I was a little bit late to join. So I sort of caught the orange team and a bit of the yellow team, I think. When I joined, I think you were talking about tradition and heritage, and yes, and I agree. It's a tricky thing, isn't it? Because in Europe, it tends to be heritage, and other cultures, there tends to be tradition. Also, when Europe uses the traditions of other cultures, it's then contemporary, and so it's this kind of, it's about power, I suppose, power of storytelling, who tells the story, especially when it comes to what we consider traditional and what we consider heritage. I think as we delve deeper into decoloniality, we realize that tradition is actually not how we've been taught, because lots of traditions have over time always been moving. It's not stationary. I think that's important in our understanding of these kind of traditional techniques and processes. The designs have always changed, shifted, evolved, and it was always very personal storytelling that was very relevant to the time that it was happening, should we say. So yes, but I mean, these are all discoveries that I am myself making, even in terms of my own heritage and my own culture. It's questions about, so I have ancestors from very many different parts across many different continents. Where am I indigenous? Am I not indigenous? What is my culture? When is it appropriation? When is it just absorption? So all of these things are part of my research, and all of these questions I am asking that I'm still, discovering. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know where it's going to end. But yeah, I do think it's interesting when we talk about tradition, especially in education. When teaching fashion design or design, and just today I was talking about co-creation and the value and the sustainable values linked to co-creation, rather than you as a designer, you become a co-creator with the community that is all part of your supply chain, your production, everything. So instead of being separate, you're actually part of, you are a participant in the creation of whatever it is that you're making, and how that might shift in terms of this hierarchy that we have, especially in fashion, as well as in how we would tell the story of the making of that said garment or product. So these are just some of my thoughts. Not a lot, just a few. And yeah.
Thank you.
We're gonna watch a video which I think needs a bit of introduction. Because the cloth that you see here in the middle, it was an empty cloth in the start, and it was brought by Branko, bought from the Linen Project, to Maastricht during a 1-week residency, of which some participants are here present today as well. And it helped us to get into the conversation. So we were doing the same thing as we're doing now with the small pieces of linen, but then on this big cloth. And then afterwards it became a traveling piece of work, which was a tool to get in conversation about decoloniality or any other topics that were relevant to the people sitting at it. So the video is about the residency, but the pieces of cloth that you've been working on today are either you can take them home or you can leave them with the cloth. It's an invitation to also become part of a bigger network that contributed to a piece of making in fabric.
And then I thought, like, what is linen really to me? Because I recognize linen straight away because of the way it cracks, or not cracks, wrinkles. Wrinkles. Thank you.
The residency was about decoloniality in the Netherlands, but I think it's really interconnected. Like coloniality is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not something that you can pinpoint in one place. It's really something that has touched all of us in some kind of way.
For me, when I first saw the fabric, it's actually for me very connected to colonization, because in a lot of books I read, I know they had like a standard list what to take to the tropics if you were going to colonize there, and it was always linen suits, and this is of course a linen. So my first feeling was that I really don't like the material. So it made me a little bit destructive, and it gave me some destructive feelings. So first I started here with some burns, and then I thought, like, what is linen really to me? Because I recognize linen straight away because of the way it cracks, or not cracks, wrinkles. Thank you. So I tried to draw the wrinkles, and for me it's very much connected to the silence of the colonization, and the way in my family it's not done to talk about it, which also gives me a feeling that I don't know how to talk about it a lot of the time.
tried to respond or acknowledge the invitation by the eco community from Colombia, the Weaven letter of invitation, to think rooted. So I think for me personally, I've been trying to figure out for a very long time where I belong, where my roots are. And then the community kind of like invited to think from where you are rather than from where your parents are or where you were born or, you know, all those cultural heritages. So I kind of like challenged myself in a way to just work with the earth. So I first started with crushing mergel with just water from here and then really having my fingers in it, and I literally just started playing with it with my fingers. And then this earth is from the tree that has kept us company all week. So again, I crushed it just with local water, and then I started adding it. These little branches are from another tree that is keeping us company all week. And so I started with the thread from the linen, and I just kind of like wanted to attach it to it. But then again, it's also looser because sometimes things are tight, but then it kind of becomes more loose. And here, this one, I joined another branch, but they also separate again. And so this is more or less like trying to figure out what happens when we take threads out, because we have had conversations where a fabric is more or less all of these threads collaborating into a fabric. But then what happens if you pull some out? Is it still having the same function, or are there things missing? And then the technique of this kind of like embroidery is that you actually take a thread and you put it back. So I really like that idea. Can we take something out and can we put it back? But then I guess it always becomes something else, something different. And so right here, again, with the thread of the fabric, I first made a braid. I braided some of the threads because I wonder, you know, this is one way of bringing together threads, weaving, but then again, braiding is another way of bringing together the threads and making a material. And kind of like as a conclusion after this week of reflecting, I wanted to go back. What started the reflection in the first place with the word rooted. And that's really my contribution.
Here we see some raw materials that got picked up during a walk together as a collective. This was first, actually from here to here. No, this one was from the walk at the St. Petersburg. This one is from the garden at the Masters we are right now. And this one is from a walk that I made with Koya. Just taking some quality time together, talking about our perspective, about the week, reflecting, and then all of a sudden I see this, and I remember how we spoke about it as a collective, about taking these stones, for example, and making paint with it. So I started here, and an important fact for me was, besides taking things that's very much found here in Maastricht, for example, this street cobblestone that just beat with a hammer and ran it to a paste and actually made some kind of orangey red pigments to actually be in the moment. So if you follow me outside, So here you can see some of the colors of how it turned out. And for me, this is the first time actually using quote unquote natural pigments. So I really didn't know what to expect. And for me, the whole process was the first time I actually took a step back from conceptual thinking to the making process and figure out what it needs to actually make the story, to actually throw the story and conceptual thinking away and just start making as a child. And the interesting thing happened is while making it at different points, my brain still wanted to go back to the conceptual thinking, so started making all kind of connections actually between what's happening.
Today I started with these very long lines in which I tried to connect the different works of different people to see to see if in that way I can also connect the different works. And because for me it's very important to always try and find, or that's also something I figured out today again and this week, is that it's very important to try and find personal, to make topics smaller than they are, so that everyone can relate to a topic. And I think that's what this cloth also did, is that because you start from something personal, new topics pop up, you get a better understanding of what your own vision and point of view is on a certain topic. And yeah, I think that's basically the most important for me, to find small doors that can be opened to get a better understanding of what different people think, and also to make it fast, to make it accessible. And I think this cloth is a very accessible cloth because it's a mess. And I think a mess is always inviting, because then there's not much you can do wrong. And I think that's also very important, that trying is a way of getting somewhere. And as long as you try your best in doing the right thing or making other people feel comfortable, I think that's very important.
So we started with the flowers, the indigenous flowers that were taken from the wall, through the wall. Brought it here and we tried to smash them into the fabrics, incorporate them. Because of all the colors, and it was also a different connection with calling them indigenous flowers, but also taking them to put on the linen, so it's also a bit of like a contrast in that. Well, the smashing didn't work as properly as we wanted to, but that's also why I guess the flowers are now as well coming in to bring some light and symbolize a bit of the hope, and hopefully finding a way to work within the system.
To be a bit more like connected to the earth in a sense. I think it was less about the smashing but more about like using the natural resources and trying to do it in the most earthly way possible. This idea of earthing and worldling. Well, anyway.
Earthing and rooting, yeah.
Earthing and rooting, yeah. So that was a bit like the idea behind what we did. We also tried to steam it to see what came out of it. So it was a lot of experimentation. So with the sun and and then what I'm doing now is a bit. So this was originally holding the fabric together. So it was like in a ribbon, and I don't know, I'm just going with the flow. And I think that this doing, like using my hands to do a collage of different things, and it's mostly about the colors, not really about the patterns or anything. So I guess it's like painting with fabric in a sense, quote unquote, just because of the color combination in a sense.
That has also been such an enriching experience.
Yeah.
Seeing the cloth and see how much richness there is in the way of working, the materials, the way everybody works by themselves and then combines it together is really a beautiful process.
Yeah, and the fact that I really liked learning about everybody else's perspectives on coloniality, because of course you're in your own world and you have your own experience, but it's very nice to connect. We don't get that chance to do that in our daily lives, I feel like. So it's very nice to have had the opportunity to pause during the week, and yeah, reflect and disconnect from our daily chores, and really be able to actively listen to other people's stories and perspectives that haven't really heard before.
I find it weird to say, oh, I'm Dutch, which as far as like, but it seems like we have a lot of, in our program, we also have non-binary performers, and sometimes when we have kind of like to invoice, they would say like, oh, this is my administration name. So it's like, oh, it's so interesting, like there's like, so funny that because of the bureaucracy, we exist in a way that it's kind of, this is how system classifies us, which is weird also sometimes. But, oh, this is, so I'm Dutch because that's where I'm registered. Yeah. But it's at the same time, in my case, like my father is of the Dutch nationality. So actually on paper, I have now a Croatian father and Dutch mother, which is weird and weird. And then, yeah, it's sort of like, oh, how that changes administratively, while we're kind of the same people that were before we came here. So it's like, so how administration is also putting something on you.
And also this idea that I think in the Netherlands you can't have multiple nationalities, right?
No,
at least they try to minimize it to a maximum, right?
I had to write.
Yeah, you see?
We had to sign the document that we reject our initial nationality to get the Dutch passport.
Violent is that, no?
Yeah, that's very violent.
And my mom had to do that for me and my sister because my dad was not around. She had an Indonesian passport, so she was like, I have to have a Dutch passport because otherwise she cannot stay.
And also it depends. It depends on the context. I mean, in this context, of course.
Yeah, when you mean like maybe if you wanna not be associated with your country.
Yeah, some people want that.
Because you also have that with refugees, right? Who feel like their country did them so much violence that they're actually happy to take on another nationality.
You know, that's interesting
But like, for example, in the case of Haiti, like you're only allowed to be a nation. You do not do anything else. Even if you live in the US, in the case of a lot of Asian Americans.
Yeah.
So then they said, but the thing is that I do understand, because that is also a sense of pride, you know, giving that. So it depends on the country that you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
No,
if you have a lot of power, or you know.
Because some passports are stronger than others.
Yeah. No, but also because imagine, I do get that, for example, that is done in Haiti because we have a lot of resources that we try to explore. So imagine an American having double nationality, being part of the government, and then having the right to exploit the land that he's also part of. So then I do get it, you know, in a sense.
Yeah, that's this passport. Yeah. Which you realize, wow, and then I remember I was at, it was Skopje Fashion Week in Macedonia, which is also part of Yugoslavia, and Bulgaria, there is like some kind of thing that Bulgaria considers Macedonia actually, that should be part of Bulgaria. So what they do, and Bulgaria is part of European Union, but Macedonia is not. So a lot of young people from Macedonia are leaving through Bulgaria. So what Bulgaria does, very kind of strategically, they offer young people from Macedonia a passport, a nationality of Bulgaria. In a way, they kind of colonize them, and through that, these young people leave to Europe. But at the same time, these young people, I spoke with one designer, he was like, I don't care, I just want to leave this country, so if that's the way how I get it, then I do it. But at the same time, it's also kind of like there is a strategy in a country taking people and then nationalizing. It's like, wow.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. There's a strategy to that.
There's actually a strategy behind it, and it's not a strategy that's written out, but you hear it when
Power.
you hear it when people talk about it. Like, oh, this is what happens. It's same in Andrea. Maybe you know, like what, for example, Croatia is doing. It has to do with religion. So what they would do? A lot of people from Bosnia that are Catholic, they can get a Croatian nationality just because of the religion, and then so they bought double, and then it's like, oh wow, so you just get it just because of that.
And how do you prove that you're Catholic? Do you get like a card that says Catholic?
You have to get it. You just know it, and usually you register in church. But
You're baptized.
those are all.
You have to be baptized. But how do they know that you're baptized? Ah, because it's written, right? As well somewhere.
Yeah, you have it on your. So, but
Yeah.
all of these, and also often religion is very messing up things.
Yeah.
But that, yeah, I noticed like that the power of passport is so weird, right?
Yeah, my sister had an Indonesian passport and she went to Asia and she had to wait super long instead of her classmates with a Dutch passport. Had to wait very long. That's why she also took out her Indonesian passport and went for Dutch, because she just wanted to travel without hassle. And it's weird that the Indonesian passport is like worth almost nothing. If you compare it to the Dutch, it used to be also like a Dutch colony and all that, but now it's just worth almost nothing. When you go there and you have that passport, there's a lot you think you have to do.
Because different former colonies of Holland have different privileges. For example, me from Curaçao, I get all the privileges that Dutch people have, almost every one of them, except for if I have to borrow money. Sometimes it's difficult because my parents, even though they have the Dutch passport and they're in the Dutch, I would say, countries, they still don't recognize the banks there for when borrowing money. They were like, oh, that's too much of a liability. But people from Suriname, especially people that got in after a certain age or didn't transfer their passport to the Dutch one, they don't have that same privilege, while they are literally in the same position. So that's kind of crazy.